to click like, subscribe, the bell notification, and whatever else YouTube has you clicking on to support us.
Hello, 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 and welcome to our next episode of Tokunomics. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Tsuburaya's business strategy. And the reason I want to do that is, one, not just to focus solely on Toei with Kamen Rider and Super Sentai and Project Red. I want to show both sides to show their similarities as well as their differences. And what I'm hoping to do with this particular episode is in the description you'll see in the description actually links directly to Tsuburaya's very public business strategy. And the reason why Super Sentai, Project Red, and Kamen Rider don't have one particular business strategy under Toei is because Toei is a little bit more dynamic. They also have a huge animation side. They have a lot of other properties for their live action movies, their dramas outside of Tokusatsu, plus they have real estate and things like that. So if anybody's interested in seeing a little bit more about Toei as a business for their strategy with all of their varying things, absolutely I can do it. Because I was reading it and I nerded out because I thought it was very fascinating all that they have that can work for Tokusatsu as well as everything else that is within their branding. But the reason why I can talk about Tsuburaya as a company versus just talking about Ultraman is because Tsuburaya is Ultraman. And I say that because on their website, they actually focus heavily on their Ultraman IP because it is their primary IP. And that is what they do the most with. Alongside that, they are known for having done a lot of monster suits, monster costuming, stunt work for that. If you've watched a lot of the Godzilla movies back in the day and everything like that, Eiji Tsuburaya helped with that. So there's a lot more to them than just Ultraman, but Ultraman really is Tsuburaya's bread and butter as an organization. So I wanted to talk about that mainly because I wanted to highlight some of the primary differences that you're going to see between Project Red, just Project Red, which is very similar for a lot of Toei's Tokusatsu. But you're going to see how very strategic Tsuburaya is, maybe having done it for so long or just because of all the struggles and challenges that they've had as an organization as well. So the first thing that's very important for Tsuburaya, and hopefully these colored markers work as much as I want them to, is global expansion. This is huge for Tsuburaya because this is really getting the word out around the world about Ultraman. So for anyone who is not familiar with Ultraman, definitely check in our playlist as Kaijin Okami has reviewed the majority of the series, especially those that are live action. He's still working to get through a lot of the animated versions of them, but definitely check them out. But Tsuburaya has been doing Ultraman for an exceptionally long time. Ultraman is actually the second series from Tsuburaya, as the first one was Ultra Q. And we're actually at a huge milestone for Tsuburaya's projects for Ultraman and Ultra Q, as we are now at their 60th anniversary. Ultra Q and subsequently Ultraman both started in 1966. Ultra Q started in the earlier part of that year. I think it was between 12 to 13 episodes. And then immediately thereafter started Ultraman, the originator of this special effects show. And truthfully, the originator of what we call tokusatsu today. So that's just a quick, brief history lesson on Ultraman. That if not for Ultraman, we probably wouldn't have had other series, because Shinomori, who is the originator of Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, with his manga books and then starting the series, he got inspirations from others. And Eiji Tsuburaya has been within the tokusatsu realm, more so on the special effects side, having worked with Toho on the Godzilla movies since the earlier part of the 50s. So there's a lot that goes into this brand. And one of the things that's been very difficult for Ultraman is that there was a court case, and if anybody wants to learn more about this court case, I would absolutely be happy to share more details about it. But there was a company in China called Chayo that had bought the international rights to Ultraman for distribution. And outside of little sprinklings here and there, anything that was Ultraman that we saw either in the States or in certain parts of the West was due to Chayo. And Tsuburaya had a very tenuous relationship with this, because they weren't able to get the same level of notoriety and foothold as consistently as more so Super Sentai did with Power Rangers. And it wasn't until more recent years when Mill Creek started releasing Ultraman in the United States, and now Alliance, who has bought Mill Creek, due to that, we're now getting more consistent releases. Plus, Tsuburaya on their YouTube channel has been doing simulcast releases of their more recent titles for Ultraman, so that networks around the world have the opportunity of being able to visit and enjoy a property that is still going strong. So with that to say, global expansion is huge for Tsuburaya, because it means that they are able to expand their reach, expand the audiences that they can engage with, and make a larger foothold than some of their competitors, to either sit at that same level or even come beyond it. Obviously, on the American side, probably more people know about Super Sentai and Kamen Rider, more so Super Sentai because of Power Rangers. And there is a hope that at some point Ultraman will be able to follow that same globalization standpoint. It doesn't mean that we'll get adaptations very similar to Power Rangers or for Beetleborgs or VR Troopers as we did in the past for those properties via Toei, but it means that we're going to get more access to this, which is a benefit of them doing this global expansion. So they're really targeting North America, they're targeting more in Europe, Asia, Australia. Not that they haven't had their own adaptations, as Australia has their own version of an Ultraman series from a long time ago, as does America. The American one, I've seen clips, definitely watch Kaiju's review. It is terrible, but it exists. So through global expansion, they're able to target new markets and do bigger things to engage those markets, either by having localization, so dubs, for instance, where audiences can watch the live action series and be able to hear it in their own native language, or they can still watch it subtitled and in the original Japanese language of the actors, or they can be able to easily obtain merchandise and see events, see toys, and different things like that that weren't done before. They can also create new strategic partnerships. So this means working with companies like Shout for Tokusatsu to air some of their Ultraman content on their Pluto TV or streaming television station, as well as on their YouTube channel, alongside having a Tsuburaya International YouTube channel that allows them to be able to promote their own content for a worldwide audience. They can also host international events. Now, this hasn't been going on a lot from what I've seen, but the hope is that they can bring in actors and actresses, stunt performers, and different individuals that have appeared in the Ultraman series over the last 60 years to be able to participate and engage in events like they do currently in Japan. I know this 60th year anniversary is huge for them, and during a lot of the shows when we were watching the latter part of Omega or any other shows, they really do a lot to show you all that they're doing with their Ultraman illumination and everything like that. So it's extremely exciting to see what they're doing to build this global focus point. The next thing that I find really fascinating is they do focus on an IP, which means intellectual property for anybody who is not in the know, and a matrix model. Definitely not like the movies, especially the newest one, because I thought that was shite. But with this, they're able to do a lot more content in digital business. So this really comes down to that streaming, to also put things out there in ways that you'd never seen before, such as the Netflix animated show that came out a few years ago, for doing a lot of additional digital content for other streaming networks, like I said with Tokusatsu, merchandising. So this means that they can increase their ability to sell products that are typically just for the Japanese markets internationally. And what's a little bit different about Ultraman versus Kamen Rider or Super Sentai or Project Red, for instance, is that they're not heavily focused on gimmicks. Yes, they do have gimmicks for how each Ultra transforms in their respective series. Sometimes they might have their little toys like they had in Omega. But what really sells for them are their vinyls. Very similar to what Super 7 does in the United States, or NECA, or any other company that sells the vinyls of Godzilla, such as Bandai. They are able to do this with Ultraman monsters. So when you see Big Joe or Red King, which is a lie, or any of the other monsters that you have appear in those varying shows, either new or old, they're able to create vinyls of them. And that's what sells as the big thing, not just the Ultraman vinyls or the figure arts or anything like that, but just to be able to have these vinyls where you can do like mini battles between the hero and monsters or aliens. And that's super exciting to do, because one of the biggest failings that you tend to see with a lot of Super Sentai figures, for example, is when they do release figures via Bandai or anybody else, or even Hasbro, is they tended to focus more so on the heroes of just having those rangers than they did with making molds and figures of the villains so that kids could have that play fighting that was very popular in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in America. So for collectors, that is a little bit of a discredit. So having a company like Tsuburaya, when working with Bandai, do that is a very smart practice on their IP, because when they're matrixing it out, they're really putting together a strategy of how they want things to go. And even with merchandising and licensing, if people want to reference Ultraman in anything or do something special with Ultraman, I think of Ready Player One. That book, they didn't do it in the movie, but in that book, they reference Ultraman, they reference Godzilla, they reference Gundams and all of that. So in something like that, it's an element of merchandising that they're able to attract audiences and get their names in those potential new audience members' mouths of like, oh, there's something called Ultraman. What is this? So that's an exciting thing when you're building that content. Now, this is the next thing that is a bit more difficult when putting together things for a company. And this is probably something that a lot of people are going to have some nervousness about, and I understand. And this is going to be digital transformation. So if you work with a Fortune 500 company these days, digital transformation is something that is constantly talked about because there's so many technologies out there, so many ways that technology can be utilized for the benefit of the company and the benefit of its employees. Even the medical industry is focused on digital transformation. Now, where it becomes a little concerning for individuals is when you hear the term digital transformation and you know that AI may be involved. I'm going to use my personal career as an example. So, notwithstanding the company I work for, AI is a huge way of transforming human resources, not taking the person out of it, because there always has to be a ghost in the machine. There always has to be a human counterpart to it. But with AI, it can help with career development. It can help with coaching. It can assist with resume writing, with interview preparation, with writing jobs that will make sense to a wider public, and assisting people when they may not have the words for what they want to do. So thinking about people who are neurodiverse and can't communicate appropriately, not saying they can't speak, but may not have the right words for what they're trying to say. AI is an incredibly invaluable tool that can help with that. And within a lot of Fortune 500 companies, AI is a helpful tool to supplement work, not take it over. Now, this is not to say there aren't industries that can bring in AI to take over a tremendous amount of work. I've been doing what I've been doing for 22 years now. And I can honestly say that yes, AI could take over significant elements of what I do. Absolutely. But because AI is not smart enough for the human element, it can never take it over fully. With customer service, it can take over 70% of it. That's absolutely wholeheartedly true. But once again, you come down to that human element. Now, I know there's a lot of conversations when it comes to television and artistic approaches, such as AI drawing art, AI writing scripts, AI actors and actresses where the people don't exist. There's a lot out there that bring concerns, and I think they're valid. I will say, as a business professional who looks at a business strategy of digital transformation, and I can understand exactly where a company is coming from. Human capital is very difficult because humans can't work 24/7, nor should they. And I am not going to be of that mindset that we need to replace people's jobs so we can be 24/7. Where I mean with that is you can have something running in the background that can work for you while the human is away. And then the human can come back in the following morning and see if it's done it correctly, make corrections, things like that. Now, when it comes to artistic work, I understand where people are coming from of relying on AI, which can take away the efforts of other people, as well as utilizing digital transformation practices like AI or anything around machine learning taking it over, that you're cutting out people's jobs. And within a culture like Japan, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing not to cut out people's jobs, but to use this transformational approach to actually give them more of a work-life balance. I think of a lot of the animation studios in the recent years that have been coming out with a lot of allegations of toxic and hostile environments where people are being asked to do things like work excessively and not taking breaks, not being paid appropriately, so many things like that. And if companies could utilize it where it can be a help to give people more of a work-life balance, then I am wholeheartedly for it. But I also am not a fan of utilizing digital transformation in replacement of people. There are certain jobs that I think are incredibly toxic and should not be done by humans because of the danger factor. And if there's a way that we can utilize machine learning or AI tools to do it for people, absolutely, I think we should. But not to replace people. Now, the other element of digital transformation that comes into a lot of this, and apologies if I'm looking down, it's because I'm trying to pull my notes from my phone, is the digital business aspect. So you have what's called D2C, or direct to consumer. And these are ways to strengthen these engagements with fans. So another thing that can come from digital transformation is building interfaces. So one thing that people have seen more commonly with Gen Alpha and some of Gen Z is the aspect of them interacting with digital content, where they could have conversations with a character that exists in a show. And if it's done in an animation type style or a very creative approach, it works. There's a lot of people who are utilizing it for connectivity with families. So if you had a family member who may have passed that somebody never got to meet, if you don't have video footage or if you only have limited, you can recreate things via AI to kind of have, admittedly, a real life ghost. And that is becoming huge. So taking something like that and using it where fans can be able to talk to their favorite Ultra or their favorite character is something that is really being looked at, and it's pretty impressive that they're doing something like this within the Tokusatsu realm. It's not the easiest thing to do, nor is it foolproof, because There's a lot of data that has to go through it. There's a lot of testing, and one of the fears that can come with utilizing any digital content that can speak to a person or via physical language or in writing, that there's challenges that people will become too dependent on it. And with the mental health crisis we see in the United States as well as in Japan, for example, and I know it's worldwide, but those are two cultures I know the most about, there's a level of concern about putting people's reliance on false idols, so to speak. I'm not looking at from the religious standpoint, but I know where that headspace can come into. The next thing that we have is called group synergies. So when you think about group synergies, you are thinking about how you can work with other companies. So group synergies is actually something that's very common in gambling institutions or video games, for example. When you think of like your MMOs, or even look at any of your slot machines. So for anybody who has never been to a gambling joint or anything like that, most casinos or even pachinkos have IP style machines. Pinball was huge for it too, very long time, where you would have a pinball machine that could be Star Wars related. And even though the pinball game really has nothing to do with Star Wars, you'd be playing it and you'd have lights, music, maybe even dialogue from those characters from the movies. Same thing with pachinko. You have a lot of companies that will use known properties. Ultraman, Kamen Rider, or even Garo. Gambling for slot machines in America is huge with it too, because you'll have Wheel of Fortune, you'll have Wizard of Oz, you'll have so many things. I've seen Deal or No Deal, which admittedly is addicting and not good, but it's a lot of fun. And it's because with these group synergies, you're utilizing two different properties, two different elements. It's not the same thing as merchandising per se. It kind of is because you are merchandising to a company. But what happens is that you can take a known property like Ultraman, put it on a pachinko or anything related to that, and you can create a synergy because you have fans of the show, obviously above a certain age, playing these games because it has a recognizable mascot. It's different than your typical merchandising, because when you think of merchandising, you think of like cereal boxes or cookies or anything like that. And those are usually a one and done. So you're buying a product that has a mascot on there from something you know. Going to go with Star Wars again, because for many years Star Wars was on Pepsi cans. And a lot of people, I think it was Pepsi, but one of the two, and a lot of people would buy these cans and never open the soda. That's a waste for me, but I understand collector's mentality. I live with one. But you'd have this merchandising where you just have the mascot, so people are going to buy it for that merchandising, that collectability. With group synergies, such as a shared revenue stream, you are working with them. Obviously, you're selling your IP for a fee. But rather than a one and done for a set period of time, which sometimes for food products is usually just for a few select months or anything like that, for gambling, for example, it's a years long thing. because these machines stay active for a very long time, and it's dual focus because it's a consistent revenue stream. And that happens a lot to be able to take advantage. Is it good? It's really dependent on the individual, but it's there because it makes the money. And it does create this stability of having people have fun engaging in something that is going to make them money. And usually it's for what they call amusement equipment. So products that people find fun and potentially addicting. And yes, it's taking advantage of something that's not necessarily great, but sometimes addiction makes you a lot of money. Look at cigarette companies, which is why it's illegal for them to do advertisements anymore, because they used to do a lot of advertisements with Camel Joe for Camel cigarettes, and it was animated so it connected to kids, and obviously kids smoked, and full circle, all the negative consequences with it. The next thing that you think about with this particular company that they do, or not think about, but the next part of their strategy is actually something that I find really positive, and that's sustainability. So when you think about sustainability, you're looking at how you can keep it going for a long time. How can you make something last forever? And that's through sustainability. Sustainability is where you find ways to keep it in everybody's mouths. But sustainability always has to start at home, and I mean within the corporation. So sustainability is talking about how do you make a corporate philosophy that makes people want to achieve the same goal you do. So I'm going to use, let's see, which company should I use? I'm going to use Nike. So you have the Nike swoosh, and you have the Just Do It campaign that was there for so long during Michael Jordan's era, and even still then. It's their tagline, Just Do It. That's part of their corporate philosophy of, you wear our shoes, you're going to have that confidence to do it, to take that leap of faith, to try something new. Obviously, wearing Nike sneakers is not making you any different of a human being, in all legitimacy. But for people who look at that tagline, it's inspirational. For the company I work for, Lockheed Martin, one of our taglines in our space division is Next Stop Mars. So the goal of practically all that we do, even if it is warfare focused in a way, is because we're trying to build what we need to do to get to Mars. Now, is it necessarily good that you have to build missiles to get to Mars? Probably not, because people use them for war. But it is what you need to get people into space at the same time. So with that, Tsuburaya has a very public and actually pretty uplifting philosophy for their sustainability, the greatest leisure for all people, and that is entertainment. So they're utilizing their IP, which is Ultraman. So even though Tsuburaya is the name of their company, named after their founder, it's Ultraman that is their legacy. So they're looking to expand on this, to build that matrix model of figuring out how to do so many new things with just one singular IP. So rather than doing too many things, they're doing one thing and they're doing everything they can to do it well. So with that, compared to Project Red, and actually, let me see, I'm going to pull these forward, as long as I don't hit myself in the head. So Toei Project Red, once again, we had those 5 things of one-stop strategy, multi-use, global expansion, modernization, and targeted content labels for Project Red specifically. All of this is a very similar process to this, but where Project Red is trying to create their own version of an MCU. So they're going to have a variety of different characters and a variety of different IPs that will all merge in together. Tsuburaya only has one IP, Ultraman. And Ultraman, being their singular IP, is able to make it where they can focus all of their efforts into that and make it where it's going to make sense, because they can expand. And that's rather than where global expansion, I'll just keep this and just lift it up and down. So global expansion for Project Red is number 3 here. So when you look at that, they have a one-stop strategy. The multi-use global strategy or global expansion is number 3. Global expansion is number 1 for Tsuburaya. Now you could say Tsuburaya has been doing this for 60 years, so obviously global expansion is important, but this has always been number 1 for them from when I've looked at their historical records. IP and the matrix model, how they can make their IP work in all of those different ways. Where Project Red, because they're coming off of Super Sentai, is trying to make everything a multi-use so that they can use it in multiple ways, which is not bad because that's very similar to a matrix model. How can you use all of your products? Digital transformation. This is something that all companies should be thinking about. Now, they don't have it here. Admittedly, I would put it under number 4 for modernization because that's where digital usually falls. But you see how they're going with this in group synergies. How are they going to target both young and old audiences? And since older audiences, especially within Japan, pachinko is huge. Just like gambling can be huge here for Americans, pachinko is huge. It's everywhere. So how do you synergize that? And lastly, sustainability. When we look at Toei for their business strategy, sustainability is not here. And surprisingly, when I was on their website, sustainability is huge for them. And I think one of the challenges about Toei is Toei can be very sustainable. They've been around for over 75 years now as a business. So they're sustainable, just like Tsuburaya is. But the one thing that they have, and I will definitely share this, is they have their hands in so many different pots, including real estate and hotels and so many other things that may not be related to what their core business is. And sometimes having your hands in so many different pots can make it difficult. And that's the one challenge that I do have with Project Red, is that they may be under that same mindset of trying to do a lot to make it bigger. And I do plan on doing another video about Toei as a business, but because it is in different areas, it's going to be a little confusing. Now with Tsuburaya here, sustainability is huge, but I do appreciate the fact as a company, their sustainability is focusing on the internal aspect. And their website is very transparent And I am significantly appreciative of that because very few companies are. And they don't have to be. Technically, a company only has to tell you the basics, even if they're publicly traded. And there's a purpose for that because they don't want to give away too much and possibly not see a return on their investment. Because if they tell you how the sausage is made, you can do it yourself. So why are you going to pay somebody else to do it for you? I know it's weird to use that sausage is made model, but it's a very common analogy within the business world. So it's always coming down to, if you know what goes behind the curtain, what the wizard does in Wizard of Oz, are you going to believe in the magic anymore? And that's why I like how they do the transparency and they give away a lot, but they don't give away a lot to a point where somebody else can steal their hard work. But they do it in a way that they are ensuring that people know what's going on. They know what their efforts are, and when they are investing or trading within that company, they can feel like they know how their money is going to be spent. And for investors, that is huge. Any of the stocks that I have, any of the investments I make, be it Kickstarter or anywhere else, I don't make investments lightly because I need to know what their plan is. Even if they fail, I still need to know what their plan is to know, is it reasonable? And so I actually do something very similar to their sustainability approach by looking at people on Kickstarter. And I will look to see how they put together their presentations. And there are some Kickstarters that I support that I wish got funded because they are a genius idea. And then there's other Kickstarters I've seen that they should never get funded because it's a very easy thing to do. And it's more or less taking advantage of people. And so that is really why I'm impressed with Tsuburaya's business strategy. Because it's very open, it's very honest. It's very honest about the digital transformation piece as well. Because of how tenuous everybody feels about AI and machine learning. And I respect that. I absolutely do, because I will say the first fear I had was, is it coming for my job? And then when I started utilizing it, I can see where it could come for people's jobs. But it's going to be 20, 30, 40 years down the road. I don't even think that Generation Alpha or even Generation Beta, which has just started a couple of years ago, have anything to worry about. And by the time we get to the generation after that, I think that we'll have figured out how to work in the same sandbox with all of our technology. And that's why I am not opposed to it like I know others are. But with that said, what do you think of this business strategy for Tsuburaya? Do you have any thoughts on it? Do you have any questions on it? Any concerns about any of these? Do you like the fact that they focus primarily on their one IP? That they go all into it? One of the future episodes I plan on doing is talking about two shows that came out at the same time from Tsuburaya for Ultraman and for Kamen Rider, to show the differences between its viewing performances based on how many episodes it had and where the fan base was. So if you're interested in seeing more, I'm going to talk about the cost of doing business for two shows simultaneously. So with that said, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye!